Derrida's work Glas is one of his most complex and enigmatic works, blending philosophy, literature, and deconstruction into a dense and experimental text. Written in two columns that run parallel throughout the book, Glas juxtaposes a deconstructive analysis of Hegel's philosophy on one side and a reading of the French novelist Jean Genet on the other. The structure itself reflects Derrida's method of engaging with meaning through fragmentation, multiplicity, and interplay of differing perspectives. Derrida explores themes of death, mourning, representation, and the instability of language while questioning the boundaries of philosophy and literature. In the introduction, Derrida explains his decision to write in two columns, signaling a departure from traditional linear argumentation. This format disrupts the reader's expectation of coherence and demands simultaneous engagement with two distinct but interconnected texts. Derrida's dual focus on Hegel and Genet reflects his broader project of deconstruction, which seeks to interrogate and unsettle hierarchical binaries such as those between philosophy and literature, presence and absence, and high and low culture. The introduction frames the text as an experimental investigation into the limits of language and meaning. The first chapter engages with Hegel's phenomenology of spirit, particularly his concept of absolute knowledge, dialectics, and the movement of the spirit. Derrida scrutinizes Hegel's privileging of synthesis and closure, arguing that the Hegelian system depends on exclusions and erasures that undermine its claims to universality. He pays close attention to Hegel's treatment of death and mourning, showing how the dialectical process incorporates loss as a means of achieving higher unity. Derrida contends that this process of sublimation relies on a repression of difference and singularity, which he seeks to recover through deconstruction. On the Genet side, the first chapter examines Genet's exploration of themes such as identity, transgression, and representation. Derrida focuses on Genet's use of language and metaphor, highlighting how his writing resists closure and destabilizes traditional notions of meaning. Genet's literary style, with its emphasis on performativity and excess, serves as a counterpoint to Hegel's systematic philosophy. Derrida draws parallels between Genet's subversion of literary conventions and his own deconstructive method, positioning Genet as a figure who challenges the authority of established norms and categories. The second chapter deepens Derrida's critique of Hegel by analyzing his treatment of negation and the role of the sublation in the dialectical process. Derrida argues that Hegel's reliance on negation as a driving force of development conceals the violence inherent in the process of sublation. By incorporating the negative into a higher synthesis, Hegel effaces the singularity and irreducibility of what is negated. Derrida contrasts this approach with Genet's celebration of the marginal and the excluded, emphasizing how Genet's writing resists assimilation and insists on the irreducibility of difference. On the Genet side, Derrida explores the themes of eroticism and abjection in Genet's work, particularly his depictions of criminality and homosexuality. Genet's celebration of the taboo and the perverse challenges societal norms and disrupts conventional moral hierarchies. Derrida examines how Genet's use of language reflects this transgressive ethos, employing ambiguity, repetition, and play to undermine fixed meanings. By juxtaposing Genet's writing with Hegelian philosophy, Derrida highlights the tension between systematic thought and the excess of language and discourse. The third chapter addresses the theme of mourning, which serves as a unifying thread between Hegel and Genet. In Hegel's philosophy, mourning is a necessary stage in the dialectical process, allowing the spirit to reconcile itself with laws and achieve higher unity. Derrida critiques this teleological understanding of mourning, arguing that it reduces the complexity of grief to a function of philosophical system building. He contrasts this with Genet's portrayal of mourning as an open ended and destabilizing experience. In Genet's work, mourning is not subsumed into a higher synthesis but remains a site of irreducible loss and ambiguity. Derrida also examines the materiality of language in the third chapter, focusing on how Hegel and Genet engage with the relationship between signifier and signified. For Hegel, language is a medium through which the spirit articulates itself and achieves self consciousness. Derrida challenges this instrumental view of language, emphasizing its opacity and resistance to transparency. In Genet's writing, language is not a neutral vehicle for meaning but a site of disruption and excess where meaning is continually deferred and contested. This analysis underscores Derrida's broader critique of logocentrism and his insistence on the importance of difference in the production of meaning. The fourth chapter explores the relationship between death and writing, a recurring theme in Derrida's work. For Hegel, death is both an end and a beginning, a moment of negation that enables the progression of the spirit. Derrida interrogates this understanding of death, arguing that it relies on a metaphysics of presence that seeks to contain and master the disruptive potential of mortality. In contrast, Genet's writing embraces the fragmentary and the ephemeral, using death as a metaphor for the instability and contingency of meaning. Derrida's analysis highlights the tension between the Hegelian drive for totality and Genet's celebration of the partial and the provisional. In the final chapter, Derrida reflects on the broader implications of his dual reading of Hegel and Genet. He argues that their juxtaposition reveals the limits of traditional philosophical systems and the potential of literature to challenge and transform those systems. By placing Hegel and Genet in dialogue, Derrida demonstrates how deconstruction can expose the assumptions and exclusions that underpin philosophical discourse. The interplay between the two columns of Glas underscores the irreducibility of difference and the necessity of engaging with the margins and interstices of meaning.